Recording is rolling. I feel that we are ready to get started. So, welcome everyone to one of the sessions of Friends of Figma World Tour. Today we are going to talk about co-designing with artificial intelligence. And if we can go to the next slide, please. All right. Before everything, I would like to introduce myself. I am Diana Wolosin. I'm part of the design system team at Indeed as a senior design system designer. And I have been in the field for around 9 years. And not lately, more like 3 or 4 years ago, I got into design system and I fell in love with it. So I have been just like focusing on it these days. And AI is also one of the passions that emerged lately. Next slide, please. So, as you guys know, we are part of a big initiative that the Friends of Figma Sydney organized in participation and partnership with a lot of chapters. Thanks to them, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to all the chapters that made this possible. This is an event that is virtual and it aims to celebrate the diversity of our global community. We are featuring speakers from all over the world, and the idea is to create an space to connect with like-minded individuals. Next slide, please. All right. Let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker has around 10 years of experience in machine learning, and he helps startups to grow. And he's an expert in AI. I actually met Cole Murray around 3 months ago when we were doing an AI challenge for a Friends of Figma San Diego event. And we had a challenge to present what was the most creative AI project. Cole Murray got there with his amazing AI presentation, and it blew all our minds. And hopefully it's going to also blow your minds today. So let's help me please to welcome Cole Murray. Cole, it's all yours. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the introduction, Diana. So I'll start off with a little bit about myself. I'll cover then kind of what we're looking to present today, and then we'll jump right into it. And so a little bit about myself, as Diana mentioned, my background is in machine learning. I was at Amazon for almost 6 years, working on the recommendation systems there. The frequently bought together customers who also bought, that was me. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time there. After I left, I started my own startup. It was a IoT company. We sold smart sensors to pharmaceutical and manufacturing companies to solve problems like predictive maintenance, anomaly detection, and kind of various other manufacturing problems. Today, I primarily focus on helping startups launch AI products and bringing them to production. For this presentation, I want to make it very clear that my background is not in design, and my goal of this presentation is to really highlight the advantage that designers have in this. And so we'll start off with just a very quick demo. It's 30 seconds. And I think I actually have the full screen. Perfect. And so here, this is just going very quickly through a basic flow. I created a meditation app here. I just thought it was a fun idea. And with just a very basic prompt, I created an entire experience. Basically, it has notifications, it has reminders, you can adjust the text size. And funny enough, the timer of this actually worked, which was pretty neat to me. I was surprised. It has user feedback. And so sorry about that. The point of showing this was that just to give a very quick look at what is possible with AI. And I think depending on your perspective, this could potentially look very threatening, or it can look very empowering. As I was preparing for this presentation, I was doing some research to see what is the design community saying about AI and how it's impacting their work. I scrolled through Reddit and a few other design sources and kind of compiled some feedback. The point of this slide is to basically demonstrate that if you're feeling some of this sentiment, that you're not alone in what you're feeling. And I want to highlight that because I think it's important to realize that the nature of our work is changing, but it doesn't have to be something that is scary. It can be something that we can feel empowered with, and it allows us to work on bigger and better problems. With that out of the way, the next few slides that I'm going to jump into will cover a little bit about how AI actually works. Now, this is going to be very high level. There is not a whole lot of technical underlying detail here. I think it's important to understand how AI is working because it helps build an intuition about how to get the best results from AI. And so here, we can basically see kind of what the AI is doing at each step. And so when the AI is predicting something, it is a sequential process, and it is looking at everything that occurred before that to predict just one word at a time. And so we start with design a modern logo for, the next thing that it predicts is A. Now, again, we go back through the sequence. Now we have design a modern logo for A, and we predict tech, so on and so forth. At each step, there's many different options of what can be chosen, and AI is purely probabilistic. And so that's kind of why you'll see sometimes in ChatGPT, you can put the exact same prompt in, and you might end up with different results. Similarly, one word can drastically change the output of what is going to come next from that output. And so the more that we're specifying, that is altering what is going to end up happening. Important, AI cannot go backwards with what it is predicting. There's no kind of delete functionality. And so everything that has occurred in what we call the context window is influencing what happened next. And sometimes you'll see that, you'll tell an AI to not do something, and it kind of subtly influences that, and you end up getting the opposite results. And so I kind of mentioned it, and you may have read this, but this idea of context. Context is basically just this idea of what are we putting into that AI to get the outcome that we want. And so here I show just some very basic prompts that are all kind of trying to do the same idea, but with different levels of specificity. Um, and so the very first version we have here is just a very basic design a mobile app. As you could imagine, the results that we're going to get for this are going to be very unpredictable because we didn't give it any restrictions on what it's actually going to output. A little bit better version here, let's say we're making a fashion shopping app, and we include that it's a sustainable fashion shopping app. And here we're actually including as well our target customer audience. And so this is eco-conscious consumers. Now, this I think is where the expertise of the designer can really shine because a designer has unique vocabulary that an engineer or a business owner or a marketing team does not have. And so by having that vocabulary, the results that you will get as a designer are going to be much better from a design perspective than what other people in the field can create. And so here I tried to create just kind of a very design rich prompt. And funny enough, I actually had to Google some of these, kind of highlighting the point that I'm not a designer and designers have a superpower here. And so here I mentioned progressive disclosure, which is going to alter how that onboarding flow is created. Here I'm highlighting some of Apple's design principles, um, highlighting thumb-friendly CTAs. That's something that I think a designer is uniquely thinking about as they're empathizing with their user. And so to kind of summarize all of this, what makes a great prompt? We want to put in the role. Who are you? You'll commonly see, you are a senior designer working on XYZ app. The goal, what are we actually trying to achieve here? We want to create a mobile app, in this case, an onboarding flow. And then most important, what are the actual boundaries and constraints that we're putting on this? And so here we put a constraint, thumb-friendly CTAs, 60-second completion time. Now, how well the AI is actually going to respect that, we'll see. But the idea here is that the more that we specify up front, the better result that we're going to get. Another tip that works well and is supported by many benchmarks within AI is this idea called chain of thought reasoning. Now, that might sound really fancy, but the underlying idea is really just making the AI think step by step. And so let's say that we're trying to create a color palette for our application. We could just ask, help me choose a color palette for a meditation app, and it will return back, let's say 9 different hex codes for that application. But because the AI is being influenced by everything we saw before it, if we can get it to think out its thoughts ahead of time, we can actually improve the quality of what we get. And so here, just by adding this, really basic part, step by step, the model is actually now going to think through each of those steps. We see here that it's highlighting calm and focus, um, readability and low light, and ultimately then we end up with our color palette. But because this is now in that sequence as we're predicting that next word, the quality of what we are going to get is better. And importantly, as well, it gives us the ability to audit how the AI thought about the problem. And so, as an example, let's say that we actually don't care about low light. Well, we can go back and put that into our original prompt and say, this is primarily meant for outdoor yoga or outdoor meditation. A similar idea here that kind of builds upon this chain of thought idea is just called planning. The idea here is that we're going to have the AI generate a plan before it actually does any work. And so rather than just asking the AI, create a user dashboard for our app, which, we didn't give it any constraints, who knows what it's going to output. And we don't really have any visibility into that other than the end result that we'll get of, here's this UI. With planning, the AI is going to first create that entire plan. And then when it creates its generation, it will have that entire plan in that context, which is going to influence the output. Importantly, it also gives us audibility of that output where we can see how it's thinking about what it's going to create and then perhaps modify our original prompt depending on that. Let's say that it is going to create a dashboard with 4 different graphs and we actually want only 3. Well, we can actually go back now and put that in and have some level of control over that AI as it is outputting the results. A lot of tools are now starting to do this automatically under the hood. And so Claude Code, for example, ChatGPT does this to an extent. And the idea here is just, again, that the more that we're getting the AI to think about our problem up front, the better that end result is going to be. Now, we've talked a lot about context windows, and I think it's really important to kind of cover that context window, basically just all the information that we're giving the AI to create that output, that is limited. And the more information that we're putting in there over time, we start to lose consistency of what we put in. We might see the AI forgetting instructions. We might have told it, hey, only use this color palette at the very beginning. And 50 messages later, it's not considering that color palette whatsoever. A common technique I've seen people using as well in ChatGPT is that they'll just keep one chat session kind of like endlessly. They'll have hundreds of messages in it. And this creates kind of a big problem because we're losing control over that context. And we're basically letting the provider, ChatGPT or Claude or whoever is using this, how they interpret how to maintain that context. In most cases, most of the providers are just creating a summary of your chat as that window grows. And so each time it gets summarized down, we're losing a lot of that information. And so when you're working on this in your day to day, the best practice is to start a brand new chat and take whatever output you had previously generated and use that in a brand new chat so that we can be very clear on what input we're giving it versus kind of just hoping that the provider summarized this correctly and is still kind of maintaining that information. And so now that we've kind of covered a little bit about AI and tips of how to improve it, we're going to next jump into some common design workflows and towards the latter half of that cover really what is kind of the designer's superpower given that tools are moving this way. And so this was a quote that I found on Reddit from one of the members, and it basically just states that with AI, they're able to shrink that time to idea drastically. And with that, you can get additional stakeholder buy-in. You're able to show your idea to your team members without really having to put in a lot of that effort upfront. And so it's the common workflows that we're already seeing from designers. Some of these you may be using in your day to day. Creating copy and content. I think that was really one of the first use cases we saw with AI. We had companies like Copy AI and a few others that really excelled in just creating text-based copy. More recently, we're now seeing stock style assets with products like Midjourney. ChatGPT can now do this, as can Claude. And I think we'll see this trend continue and improve over time. The UI mockups, I think, is a very rapidly developing area. We're seeing a lot of products being created specifically for creating UI mockups, as well as entire products. And then the last use case we have on here is research personas. And for each of these, we'll cover a bit more in depth. And so for copy and content, a few important things that I want to highlight with this slide. Um, Anytime that we are generating really anything with AI, a huge advantage is that we don't have to accept just one result. Because the generation is so fast and effectively free, we can generate many different variations of a outcome and pick the one that we prefer best. And so here, rather than just saying, generate me a CTA for my sign up button, we can generate 5 different ones. Similarly, we can influence what is actually going to be coming out of that by adding additional things like voice and tone. And so if it was technical documentation, maybe we see, an error message like this. Whereas if it's something maybe more professional, it's not going to say oops in a professional context. And so the idea here is that you can take all of your strategy and your context, your brand, everything that you're working on, and use that to influence that copy and content. Now, UI mockups, building on that idea of specifying as much as we can upfront, I've created here a few different prompts that are kind of progressively better as we're adding more information. And so the most basic one, this might be somebody who has no real product experience. They're just, create me a dashboard. And what you'll get is probably going to be a very generic looking dashboard. Because most of the tools are pretty good nowadays, it'll probably be okay. But it is very unlikely going to be what your brand or your company needs. And so kind of moving up a level here and bringing in some of that designer context. We're specifying sustainability here, eco-conscious, millennials. We're highlighting, hey, we want to see metrics. We want to see a certain color palette here. Mobile first, thumb-friendly navigation. Again, we're taking all the things that you're already thinking about as a designer and putting that into the prompt to influence that output. And then kind of a level up from there is, including actual specific design terminology, progressive disclosure, Gestalt principles, micro interactions on hover, little like animations, things like that. And so to recap, things that AI does really well, it's very good at doing layout and structure. Um, if you can specify that upfront, you're going to get good results. It's very good at creating components. It's very good at creating basic interactions. Very good at creating responsive design as well. As Diana highlighted when in that prior event, when I had created that website, it was perfectly responsive and was pretty impressive to me actually that it worked first try. But Importantly, the things that it is not going to succeed at, unless you're specifying it, is your brand and your voice, the user journey that you've thought a lot about, the accessibility nuances, as we saw in the prior meditation example. That low light might be critical for your experience, and the AI is just not going to put that in automatically. And so I really liked this summarization of this that AI is great at creating that structure. It's great at executing, but you as the designer are ultimately the one creating that experience. And it is really in your hands to kind of guide the output of the AI to match the experience and solve the problems that your users actually have. How are we doing on time? Okay. Um, so the asset creation bottleneck, this is a very common workflow we see from design teams. Previous world, we would use stock photos for everything, whether that was Pixel Days or many of the other sites out there. If you've used enough of these, you'll start seeing those same exact pictures on maybe competitors' websites, which is pretty awkward. Um, the alternative is to do, everything in-house. We're going to have a custom photo shoot. It's very expensive. It's very time-consuming, and we might not even end up with the shot that we want. And another big challenge is that actually representing our customer base can potentially be quite difficult to get all of that for a real photo. AI is great at this because AI can basically create whatever we are describing, especially with kind of the newer tools coming out from Google. The line between AI and realistic is becoming closer and closer, and I believe that that trend will continue. And so this is just kind of a summary of the various things that AI can create. A few that are my favorite are icons and UI elements. I think it's pretty fun to be able to add just a custom design pack for your product, especially within engineering. There's a very common framework called ShadCNN that pretty much every website uses now. If you've seen it, you'll know it. Every website now has the same icons, and you as the designer can now use AI to create very widespread icon packs for effectively free. I mean, yes, it takes your time, but it allows you to really create that tailored experience for your customers, which I think really just stands out and goes kind of above and beyond the icon packs that you're seeing today. Importantly here, again, AI can create these assets. The value that you as the designer are bringing is that you're able to think about which of these assets make sense. Where are we going to put them? Why are we even going to put them there? Where AI just doesn't have that judgment. You ask it to create that dashboard, it'll happily create that dashboard for you, but it's not going to understand the nuances of the experience that you're trying to create. And you, as the designer, have that advantage where the engineers, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about how do we make it fast? How do we make it performant? How do we try new cool technology? Where you, as the designer, are the one empathizing with the user. You're the one doing the UX research, thinking about these problems, and really are uniquely suited to use these tools at such a higher level than most others will be able to. Kind of touching upon that UX research, another common workflow that we see is AI powered research. I think there's a lot of different ways that this can be used. Um, One of a technique that I really like is that let's say that you have a customer call with a customer, you've recorded it through some fancy AI note taker. With all of those notes, we can now use that to generate interview questions for the next customer call. As we ask those questions, we take the feedback, and we basically have this feedback loop where we're better understanding our user with each interview. Similarly, with the results that we're getting, depending on how many users we're actually interviewing, we might not be able to process that with humans. There might be 100,000 surveys that were taken, and to be able to process that is just non-feasible. And so you end up kind of having to pick one of two options. Option one, you sample those, you take maybe 50 of those surveys and we hope that we got a good distribution. We probably didn't. And so that is a pretty big flaw in that approach. The alternative here is that we could use AI to actually summarize and analyze every single one of those surveys, 100,000 of them. AI will handle that no problem. And again, this is an opportunity for your unique advantage as a UX researcher. You are the one going to be writing the prompt of that survey analysis. And so you're able to put your thoughts into that and influence how it's thinking about that. You might highlight that certain things about your brand. You might highlight that we don't care about this specific type of problem. We want to highlight these problems. And with all of this, it's real users are the only way that we can actually validate this, whether that's through A/B testing or some other means. And so AI is a assistant here. It's a tool. It's not instantly solving user research. There's still very much a designer, a UX researcher in the loop here. The last one, which I think kind of fits into all of these things, brand identity, other things, is AI generated personas. And so this persona here is actually AI generated. And I thought that this was just kind of a fun persona that was generated. In this case, it's a very busy mom. She's taking her kid to school. She has meetings, and it brings out some of the nuances that otherwise may not have been thought of. And so kind of highlighting here, again, this mom is so busy. Well, our experience then needs to be built around that one-handed operation because they're not going to be on a computer. They're going to be running, dropping kids off, in between meetings, other things, and primarily working on that mobile device. I really liked this one here as well, the progressive saving. Um, because we know that the persona here is constantly getting interrupted, there's a line item here, no respect for interruptions. It's really important that this experience handles this gracefully. If the user were to get interrupted and then lose all of their progress, that would be terrible. That is not a great experience. Um, Again, AI can help with some of these, but a lot of this persona generation is going to come down to you putting in that context in about who your user is and influencing the output. And again, you have to audit all of these. The AI is not just magically solving this problem, it's still your judgment that is going to take this generated persona and refine it and act on it. And so, as mentioned, we get this kind of loop where you, as the designer, you're not necessarily involved now in every output creation, creating those icon packs, which historically a designer was involved in. Well, now we can have the AI do that, and you get promoted to the creative director. You get to look at maybe 100 variations of icon packs, and you get to pick the best one for your product. You get to refine it. You might see that, well, actually, we don't like this color scheme in our icons, or we want flat icons or minimalism or whatever fits your product. And you are now kind of supervising the AI in a sense and ultimately guiding its creative output. I think on the far left side, we've seen a lot of bad results from this where designers were not in the loop, and people are putting out what is now commonly called slop, where we see these terrible AI generated images that we instantly know they don't have any taste to them, and if anything probably harms the brand more than it helps anything. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay. And so here I have kind of a more in-depth video that we'll cover through. I'll pause as we're going through it. Um, and this video is going to show the end-to-end flow of creating basically a product, in this case, a Craigslist app. I chose that just because it's a app that most people know. It has some interesting aspects about it. And so I'll pause through this as we're going as well. And so here, this is me actually typing this in. As you can see, my ability to describe the design of this is definitely not going to be as good as a designer. because I don't have that vocabulary, and that is kind of the designer's superpower. And so, I put modern design patterns. Like I just don't have the vocabulary for that. Follow best design practices. If you're a designer, you know best design practices. I don't. I'm completely relying on the AI for this. And so we continue through this. And kind of an interesting thing that I want to highlight here, you can use AI to create prompts that you then put into these tools. This is kind of a interesting tip in that the quality of what you're going to get, the AI can actually create a lot. And so as we see here, I'll kind of skip through a little bit. AI created in this case the entire description of our application. We have a product vision, it's highlighting that, hey, this is optimized for XYZ. It's highlighting the overall kind of brand and the design system that we're going to use here. We see color palettes. We see what type we're going to use, the grid, how we're actually going to lay this out on the page. And ultimately, it spits out a whole bunch of things. But again, this is where the design really comes into play because you are the one who is able to audit this. Does it make sense for this color palette given our brand goals? Does it make sense to be using this type? The AI, maybe it has a concept of this, but you being the designer, you're the expert here, and you're able to review this, edit it, influence it, and kind of go through that loop that we previously saw. And so I'll skip to kind of the end here. Basically, we paste this into a tool called V0. And let me start. And so we see now we have, a pretty basic looking Craigslist app. It has little fun icons, a couple other things. We have a sign up screen here, a homepage, and overall, it pretty much completed the application as we described it. I really liked the little sidebar here. It was a cool little touch. But again, kind of going back to you as the designer, it's very likely that it could not have put that sidebar in there. Whereas if you have thought a lot about this problem, uh, you probably would have thought that, hey, we're going to need filters given that there is a very large amount of products on this website. And I think that that's pretty much it for this demo. Yeah, I thought that that was just pretty fun. Oh no. And so covering that, where the AI falls short. AI is not the best at consistency across the designs. It takes a lot of effort to be specifying that up front. Again, as you're working with these tools, put all of that context in there. Put your brand guidelines, put your palette, put all of those things that you would tell your teammate, provide that to the AI. It's not very good at branding. Again, it's really going to come up to you to be specifying that to the AI. It's up to you to be refining, providing your judgment. Is it actually doing a good job here? And then another big struggle is that precision. AI, at least in its current form, is not always perfect, as we saw in kind of that meditation app. We went through it very quickly, but there's a couple of things that were like definitely out of place when I looked at it. Specifically, like the play button was not properly in the ring, and maybe like you could argue that that was the design, but putting my design lens on it, that's not what I would have wanted. And so those are kind of gaps that we see. And I think that transitions then into what is your edge in this AI world? Previously, similar to engineering, a lot of engineers prided themselves in being able to write code, and that was kind of the tool proficiency. They were great in whatever language, whatever framework. Similar with design, I think there's a lot of you know pride in being great at a certain tool, whether that's Figma or After Effects or any of these other tools. As time goes on, tool proficiency is going to be a foundation. Everyone is going to have tool proficiency. The same way with calculators that everyone has, mathematical fluency now. As long as you can type the right numbers in, then the tool is pretty much going to do what you told it to do. Moving up a level, this is where the designer starts to shine. The AI, again, because of that narrow context window, is only thinking about the problem that you described. It's not thinking about the bigger system of your business, your brand, identity, all these other things. And really, that falls on the designer to be the one guiding and thinking about that bigger picture. And this is your edge. Similarly, AI, if you've ever had it write a story, they're not the best at writing stories. Um, Now, if you provide it a lot of good context on like, this is what an amazing story is, I want a story about this and that, really kind of guiding it, well, then your story is probably going to be much better. Again, this is going back to AI is great at execution. It's the designer that is building the experience. Similarly, it's the designer who is telling the story and guiding the AI to create whatever artifacts we're looking for. At the very top of this, and I think the biggest advantage the designer has is the taste. A designer knows why something works and not just that it works. With kind of tool proficiency, it's very easy to create a dashboard now. Is that the right dashboard? Is it useful? That's up for you as the designer to decide, and really are still very much in the driver's seat in this kind of new AI co-designing world. And so if we're just using AI with no real taste, no real judgment, we end up with nothing. We end up with the slop that we see on Facebook and other places where the images are very clearly AI generated, sometimes missing fingers completely and other very peculiar AI things. And so the taste here is really what is going to amplify the output that you're getting. And so previously, things kind of operated where the designer, at least in some contexts, was seen as kind of like the output maker. They were the ones creating these artifacts. Hey, we need a button here, we need an onboarding flow, we need this, we need that. I think things are changing. Today, we're moving more towards the designer kind of being the creative director of this. They're overseeing the artifacts that the AI is creating. They're the ones giving thumbs up, thumbs down. No, that's a bad image. It doesn't fit our brand. We're not going to put it in there. Where I think things are going, as AI gets better at kind of thinking of this system, as the quality gets better, we're going to also need to level up and start thinking about at an actual strategy level. What makes sense for our business? What products do we want to be launching? Really thinking about the system that we're building as a whole and using the AI to deliver on that execution. And so we need to shift away from how do I make this? How do I make this component? How do I make this animation? To why are we doing those things and what should we be making? A little quote here at the bottom. You're deciding what rectangles should exist. Drawing them, the AI can do that now. It is your taste that is really going to make a great design. I find when starting out with AI, it can be pretty difficult. And so I created basically just a very basic kind of starter here to just get experience with AI. And so there's a tool called V0, which was what I demoed the Craigslist app of. And my suggestion would be try this tonight. Go to V0, put in some app that you've been thinking of. It could be a dog meetup app, it could be a meditation app, it could be anything that you want, and just work through the AI to create this. There's many different tools out here. I don't have a preference on any one, and kind of the point of this presentation is not any specific tool. And so check out all of them. Each of them have kind of their own pros and cons. And kind of going back to the taste, each of them is different and better at certain things because of the taste that the designers and the team have put into these tools. And so to close this out, we kind of see, looking back at history, we've had this what feels like an attack on creatives for a very long time now. In the 1840s, as photography was starting to become a thing, there's this really big outcry that, oh, photography is going to kill painting, and painting is over. There was people who were mocking this, saying, I can't believe we said that. And surprise, we still have painting today. If anything, it's more valuable than ever. We see art being sold for enormous premiums. Similarly, as radio came online in the 1920s, people feared that, oh my gosh, live music is over. This is the end for all of us. Well, it turned local audiences into national audiences as time grew over time. We saw Spotify and other things expanding the reach of the everyday musician. And music and concerts, I think, are bigger than ever now. And unfortunately, charging a big premium to go see live music now. Similarly, kind of again, just the cycle repeats with photography. There was a big outcry when Photoshop came into the scene. People were very concerned that their hard-earned photography was going to be erased. Um, it changed. Digital editing is now a thing. Photography is still very much a thing. So bringing this to the present day, there's a lot of talk that AI is going to replace designers. And I challenge you guys, it's our turn to write this story of what this looks like. And with that, we can transition into the Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Cole. Amazing. That was not a talk, that was a master class. That was amazing. I am particularly impressed how you showed how AI can be applied through all the processes for designers. That was one thing that I really liked about this presentation. And the second thing that it's gonna get stuck in my head as a takeaway is the quote that you mentioned: AI's context window is like a designer's workspace. That is such a beautiful metaphor, and you're right. That little box there is like our Figma canvas today. All right. Okay. So we have a bunch of Q and A's. We could start the first one here. Cole, do you have access to the Q and A panel?
I do, yes.
Right. So the one at the very bottom is the very first one.
Okay, the one at the bottom is the first one. Okay. Was the meditation app V1 created purely using ChatGPT? Yes, so that was purely created using a tool called V0. Under the hood, it's using very similar models to ChatGPT. It's not exactly ChatGPT. They've kind of put their own taste on top of the AI to get it to create high quality. But yes, that was completely with AI. I did not create any of that other than the actual prompt.
All right.
Yeah, going on to the next question. How do you check for hallucinations in AI outputs, especially when working on design projects? Any tips on spotting them or preventing them? Um, yeah, good question. So I think hallucinations are always going to be a thing, the same as, we as humans, people make things up all the time. Um, And a lot of the tools are starting to move towards citing things. You'll see now in kind of ChatGPT, it'll actually cite the sources of where it came from. Um, but ultimately, I don't think that there is kind of a magic solution to solving this. It really comes down to you as the designer, you as the creative, actually looking at what you're creating. And kind of, again, this is your superpower. This is the judgment that you are going to put over those outputs. Okay, so let's see. All right, this is kind of a long question. As designers, we often have a unique advantage in how we approach design, but without an engineering background, wouldn't it be harder for a designer to vibe code without understanding fully of what can make or break the code compared to someone with an engineering background and mindset? I've been trying to learn as much about coding as I can in order to bridge the gap. Yeah, great question. So I get this quite frequently of like, should I learn to vibe code? Um, I would say no, because I think we're seeing a lot of design tools like Figma, where rather than trying to learn engineering, which is not the designer's superpower, the tools are being brought to the designers in kind of their native tool. And so Figma, they briefly had a AI tool. They now have the publish to sites. And I think that we're going to keep seeing trends like that, where the the gap between kind of that engineering and designer is shrinking in the respective spaces. similarly, when engineers ask me like, "Oh, should I learn Figma?" I'm like, "No, you should go find a design friend and you guys can work together." Because I think each side has their superpowers, and I think that we should play to our strengths rather than trying to kind of be the jack of all trades. Okay, so if I don't have a background in engineering as a product designer, how can I pick up the basic skills to be able to use AI? Yeah, I think the way to pick up the skills is kind of the same as picking up skills in any domain. It really comes to just putting in the time of playing with these tools. The same way that, if somebody asked you, how do you become good at Figma? I would say, build a lot of things in Figma and you'll become good at doing that just because you've done it a lot. And so I think to become good at AI tools, practice building a lot of things with AI. And the more that you build, the more nuances that you start to see and kind of the new tricks that you pick up. And for better or worse, the more that you use it, the better you will become at spotting AI as well, just because you're used to these little nuances that will show up. Okay, next one. During the user research stage, how do we ensure the user inclusivity is not overshadowed by the efficiency and bias of AI? Yeah, good question, Aaron. I think that this just goes back to you as the designer being in the loop and why it is so important to still have that designer in the loop, because you're the one thinking about these things, and the AI is not, unless you tell it to. And so this is kind of the designer's time to shine by including all of these inclusivity as well as accessibility. Next question, keen to hear your thoughts. When it comes to feeding client product information into AI, how do we evaluate and acknowledge appropriate use? Uh, Great question. So the question is basically around, what should we be feeding into the AI, concerns around that. Um, I'll answer the question two different ways. Um, if you're using the API of these tools, the privacy policy technically says they don't train on your output. Now, you could take that for whatever it's worth. I think the more important thing is that you as a company, you as your client, you get approval to do these things, because yes, they might say that they don't retain this data, but at the end of the day, it really comes back to you on what you've put into the system. Okay, let's see how we're doing on time. I got a few more. So with the
We have
power,
for a couple of questions more.
okay. Um, so I was wondering if there are any considerations when it comes to sustainability. Are there any best practices with prompts or types of AI we can use to best limit our environmental impact? I don't feel qualified to answer this question, so I'm not going to try. Um, what I will add, I did get asked a similar question about this a while back. Um, Take a look at what the actual environmental impact of AI is. There is a lot of misinformation going around, and I think it's worth doing your own research on what resources it's actually consuming relative to other things. And you then make your decision of how you want to use the tool. Maybe you come out of that finding that, well, I'm not going to ask it, uh, less useful questions about how to cook a chicken for dinner, how to make my recipe, if you feel that it does have a large environmental impact, and maybe you use it only for kind of mission critical tasks. Next one, which platforms do you think are the best for designing to such a detail beyond ChatGPT prompts? Are you talking about only artifact generation in the form of only images? Yeah, great question. So I think there's a lot of different platforms that are good at different types of generation. Just a second. Turn on the light. Great. I think each tool kind of has its own strength. I think Midjourney is great for generating images. There is a tool called Kling AI that is also very good at generating images as well as video. Google Gemini has the ability to generate images and video now. I would say that Gemini, the Veo 3, is the best at generating videos. In terms of generating UI mockups and kind of products, which is mostly what I focus on, I think V0, in my opinion, is one of the best at generating the actual UI. Um, it doesn't always design complete product experiences, and it's not necessarily designed for that. I find that Lovable or Bolt.new, or a couple of the other tools out there like Replit, um, those target more of kind of a complete product. Um, but I find that typically the designs in them aren't as good. So sometimes you need to kind of mix and match between them.
All right. Cole, thank you so much for your availability. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. And I think that everyone here needs to give grace to Cole because he is not a designer, and he's an engineer, and he has given us a masterclass to designers. So thank you so much, Cole, for that. To the people who have participating in the session, please stay until the end because we have a giveaway, but I'm going to let Cole to share his social media.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. And thanks, Diana, for giving me the opportunity to present here. If you're looking to connect with me and discuss further, I can be found on LinkedIn. My user ID is just my name. And then I have a personal website as well, which is just my last name, first name.com. Yeah, and if you are looking to build AI products, that is kind of my area of expertise. I specialize in helping startups, primarily seed and Series A startups, take AI products and bring them to production. I think sooner than later, most of us find that it's pretty easy to build an AI product about 80% of the way, but getting it that last 20% is actually quite difficult. And that is kind of what I specialize in, of taking it that last 20%, which is roughly like 80% of the actual effort.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole. All right, I think that we're ready for the giveaway. Let's go to the next slide. Great.
Alrighty.
The people who participated in the Q&As apologize for the questions that we didn't have enough time to answer. Please feel free to reach out to Cole to get answer to your questions. And for the people who were able to get their answer, to get their question replied, we have a giveaway, so I'm gonna let that to Cole to decide. We have a lot of participation. The idea is to select the participant who asked the most insightful question and the question that probably provided the most value for the conversation. So I don't know, Cole, who do you think that asked the most valuable question?
Yeah, give me a few seconds to read through this. We can do a little drum roll.
And again, the people who did not get their question answered, apologize. I'm pretty sure that Cole has valuable insights and answers for those. So please feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn.
Alrighty, I've got a winner. For the gift card, I will pick Jaden Tran with a question around vibe coding. I think it's a question that is on a lot of people's mind. I think it's a great question that I hear come up. And yeah, you are today's winner.
Woohoo, Jaden, congratulations. So I'm sending you on a DM your code. For everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining us to this session. It was a pleasure having you, Cole, here. As always, it's amazing to learn from you. And I will see you guys in the next chapters. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.